Italy, the new big focus tree for Hearts of Iron 4 and the big new expansion. And for the most part, they've done a really fantastic job. There's cool new features throughout this national focus tree. And one of them is strange because it's kind of hidden deep within the focus tree, but it unlocks a new support brigade, which I think is pretty insane to say. Why would they hide it so deep down in the focus tree? So you need to go down the Del Deuce path or convene the Grand Council. So you either have to go fascist in any form, or you have to go monarchist, which I think down the monarchist path, you can even go democratic. So I suppose there's a lot of options here. The only path you can't go down is the commie path. So any path that is monarchist, potentially democratic, and also fascist in any form, you get to go down all the way down to here, the Di Assalto. Our black shirts stand in the proud tradition of assault groups of the Great War. By integrating them into our army, we'll give them a powerful offensive punch in combat. Unlocks the assault battalion, which is confusing because it's not a battalion. It's a support brigade. Figure that one out. Anyway, let's actually assess, are assault brigades worth your time? Is it worth rushing to take advantage in the wars? Which I'll admit, with it being so down the focus tree, a lot of the time you kind of ignore it. For me, I always forget it's even there. So is it worth moving away from your ambitions and going for the focuses, or is it worth rushing and going for assault brigades? Today we will answer that question. Anyway, first of all, what we'll do is we'll create actually what we can do is just create it on its own. That's not a good idea because it's giving me false numbers there. So let's go for one battalion, and then we'll add on the assault battalion. So first thing is the division recovery rate goes down by 0.05. Not massive, but notable. Top it off, you gain a chunk of defense. That's good. Get a little bit of breakthrough. That's okay. Sword attack goes up slightly. That's decent. That's decent. And not as good as support artillery, but it's decent. Heart attack goes up by a marginal amount. Supply use goes up by a tiniest amount. Not a big deal. Interesting. Suppression goes up by 1.5. Now that's interesting because that might have a double use. Now here's the big kicker. You lose 25 organization. That is really big. And I imagine what's happening is that scales based on the size of the division. So for instance, this is a very small division. So if we add it on this larger one, we're losing 7.1 organization. So it does seem like it scales a little bit more favorably if you're using a realistic size division. I think what's confusing sometimes is some of these numbers are set increases like 10% extra attack into certain terrain types. And no matter the size of the division, it will always be 10% attack into that terrain type. You're also gaining plus 40 HP, which doesn't scale based on the overall size of the division. In this case, it's still plus 40 HP. So just be aware, sometimes the improvements are proportional based on the overall size of the division, and some of them are just set increases by a set amount based on what you're adding on. In this case, HP is definitely the case, and also production cost, also manpower, also training time, also equipment costs for equipment and support equipment. So this is using support equipment. Be aware of that, okay? So it works very similar to all the support companies here, because all of these ones all use support equipment in some way, shape, or form. All of these ones, where for instance the artillery, AA, and anti-tank only uses the set equipment of that set weapon that you're adding on. Just be aware of that. So the big takeaways here is, one, extra HP is amazing, particularly on very small divisions. In this case, it's only 25 HP, jumping up to 65, which is like, wow, that's a big difference. The notable downsides, though, is the cost. But everything else is kind of okay. It kind of does a little bit of everything, but doesn't really do anything. Does that make sense? It's kind of like adding on a battalion of infantry, but adding it on as support. In that case, it makes me question why it uses support equipment. Because if that's the idea behind this division or this battalion, why would you need support equipment? An interesting strategy though, using a assault battalion with 1-2 width infantry battalion, because now it's viable because you've got a lot more HP. However, the org is kind of horrendous though. Something to worthwhile. Okay, let's compare like for like to artillery. Be aware, this is 1936. This is all the starting technology for Italy. So I feel like as a kind of base ground values, it just gives a bit of an idea how they compare. But be aware, you're not really going to get assault battalions until at least 1938, just based on your focus rate. I guess unless you rush it from the very start of the game, which you might just get it in 1937. So overall, the defense values are significantly more favorable for the battalion. The soft attack is significantly better for the artillery. However, the production cost overall is significantly better. I think the only big takeaway from this is that this is basically like adding on an extra battalion of infantry but as support, which is just a little bit unusual, I suppose. But let's say this is a realistic size of an infantry division. Let's go for a 20 width. Of course, it's not meta at the moment because of the way combat width works at the moment. But if we add that on, it's almost like me adding on an extra new infantry battalion, one of these, compared to adding on this. Like, for me, it's way more cost effective to add on a single division of infantry because it's cheaper, because it doesn't use support equipment. Plus, you're buffing the organization, which kind of in my mind makes me feel like, what is the purpose of this? I feel like it fits into this weird gray area where it's like, what are you actually doing that isn't better than an infantry division? The only big takeaway from this, I think the big 40 plus 40 HP increase is actually significant, particularly as a part of an infantry-based army. So that could result in you bleeding less equipment and bleeding less manpower in the long run. So I think assault battalions would be worthwhile. It's one of those ones, it doesn't help you win, but it lets you sustain the combat for longer. But then why would you take away my organization as well? It's like, I'm so torn with this. I want to love it, but I'm also kind of like, why are you taking away organization from me? That's kind of my key fighting ability. So if we were to compare like for like support artillery or an assault battalion, support artillery wins every single time. It's cheaper and it adds more of that one thing that you want, which is soft attack. And then I suppose the next comparison is comparing a single infantry battalion to the assault battalion. The single battalion of infantry is always beneficial. I suppose you could say the one added benefit of the assault battalion is that it doesn't increase combat width. Is that even a big deal? I suppose you're in this alternative universe, you have the perfect division with 4 of the 5 support slots filled out. I'd be totally down to add a support battalion as the 5th one. Yeah, totally. I think I'd be down for that. So as a like for like, it seems to suck to me. The only instance where I feel like it's worthwhile is if you already have a full division as it is, and it's that 5th slot just to fill it out. So let's go for something else. Okay, so it doesn't really work as an infantry battalion replacement. It doesn't really work as a support company. Let's see as a replacement for suppression as a garrison division. So its base amount of suppression is 1.5. The base suppression of infantry is 1.5. So what difference is this going to make? I don't know. I thought there was actually a viable alternative option here, but I really don't think there is. I'll admit it's unusual to add 1.5 suppression as a part of a support company, because all of the support companies don't increase suppression, and they don't increase it by a base amount as well. The only one that increases it is MP, but it increases it by a percentage amount, so it increases the percentage amount overall. None of them increase it a base amount by 1 or 1.5, you know? So it makes me think to myself, what is the calculation going on there? So let's think about that for a second. So it's not increasing the combat width. However, it's increasing the suppression. So does that make it make it a more viable suppression tool? So you could pair an MP on with an assault battalion to get an overall more equipment-based suppression cost? I'm almost certain, just with running the numbers through my mind here, that is not going to be a net gain. Well, there's always one way of finding out, right? Let's just run the worst test in the world. Guys, do not take these numbers too seriously. This is well and truly the worst test in the world, okay? But we're just going to run some really quick fire numbers just to see if there is anything to gain from this one-off scenario. So we'll start off with standard horse, okay? And we'll do it as military governor, because apparently I've been told that's a really good middle ground. And then we'll check the occupation numbers. 73k garrisons and about 8.8 for equipment cost. And that's just a raw division. Now, if we add on MP onto the horse, that means we get a refund of about 10k manpower. Oh, it actually shows. Oh, this is really useful. It shows the improvement. So this is 13% more effective than the previous division. Basically, the game is basically telling me the calculation. Oh, thank you so much, game. So now, if we change this from MP to assault battalion, it's actually less effective. It's less effective than what we did to begin with. So if we go for both, let's do both. Why not both? It's 111%. It kind of feels like they work better in synergy together, but overall it's still better to have the MP on its own. Let's just do something really weird. Let's have one battalion of horse. And this is not the cost-effective solution because, I'm not going to give the full explanation again. I've done too many times, but it's all proportional based on combat width. So one 2-width battalion, 100% is 74k and 8.88k equipment. So if we add on a military police, it's a net loss because the amounts are proportional based on the amount of divisions that go in a certain area, and support companies don't scale with the overall size of the division. I made a dedicated video on garrisons and how they work, but just understand that that's the reason why 2-width horse doesn't pair with MP well. That's why you have to make the horse division bigger. Okay, so I suppose the very final test is we do the gargantuan 50-width horse. Well, here we go, boys. This is the last opportunity for the assault battalion to be worth our time, okay? If it does not save here, unfortunately, I have no reason for you to ever put on the assault battalion. So 100%, 73k manpower. We add on the assault battalion. It becomes 1% less effective. Okay. If we compare that with an MP as well, it gains 22% of effectiveness. It's really nice that the game calculates that in game for you. However, if it was just MP on its own, it's still 22%. Ooh. That just breaks even, doesn't it? No, it is more effective. But it's probably like less than 1% more effective. Because what you're doing here, if you think about it, is you're making the combat width larger by adding the assault battalion on there. But the effectiveness is less than 1% more effective. So there is some benefit there. But it's so small. There we go, 7.19, and we remove it. No, it's actually less effective. It's less than 1% less effective. Guys, I can honestly say to you, comparing most support brigades to assault battalions, every support brigade comes out on top. If I compare it to a basic infantry battalion, the basic infantry battalion comes out on top. We're not doing very well here. There's 2 down. And third and finally, if we compare an assault battalion to a garrison division, whether it being a small one, a large one, or a large or small one with an MP added onto it, without the support battalion, ends up being more effective. So how does this fit into your typical game of Hoi 4? It doesn't. It doesn't. They're not very good at all. They need to be buffed in some way, shape, and form. They're not very good. Oh, they're so bad. The novelty of this should be that it adds on extra stats without increasing the combat width, but the stats aren't high enough to make it worth your while. So what's the point? I kind of like how it gives stats, but it also has downsides such as the org loss and the recovery rate is less. I like that, but it feels like the raw stats of the division are just way too low. That HP needs to be increased to like 60. The suppression needs to be doubled to 3, just so it can find a viable place in the game. It serves no purpose at the moment. Everything is less effective. Now, there is one exception. So it's lost 4 of the 5 tests. The final 5th test is if you like to role play. Now, you always forget that, right? And if you want to play as a crack grand battle plan, World War I, Italy, and you want to add on your assault battalions as they did in the First World War, and you want to role play that as a massive infantry push grand assault boyo, be my guest. But overall, from a min-maxing perspective, it falls flat in every way, shape, and form. Anyway, guys, if you support my content, like and subscribe. And if you want to pay me a coffee, feel free to hit the Patreon, which is in the description below. I love you. And if you want to love more content and you're not done loving today, I know you haven't, check this video out. This is your part 2. I'll see you soon.